Okay, so let's unpack this. Imagine you are sitting in a courtroom. You're defending yourself against a really serious criminal charge.
Right, like real jail time on the line.
Exactly. The prosecution claims you caused, quote, serious public disorder, and your alleged weapon for all this, a single social media forward.
Wow.
Yeah, just a tap on a screen from a tiny, practically anonymous account.
Which is terrifying.
It is. And the normal response, I mean, you would probably cite legal precedents, right? Or maybe call a character witness to say you didn't mean any harm.
That's standard legal strategy, yeah.
But instead, you step up to the stand and you just pull out the laws of quantum mechanics, network topology, and statistical physics. You use all that to mathematically prove your innocence.
I mean, it genuinely sounds like the plot of a sci-fi legal thriller, but we are looking at an absolutely real, rigorously documented defense strategy today.
We really are. So this is what we're exploring in today's deep dive, this wild intersection of complex system science and criminal law.
It's so fascinating.
We've got this incredible stack of documentation from a platform called Chat2 Thelms, and it meticulously breaks down the defense of a Dr. Chen Jingyuan.
And he didn't just argue a little bit of science.
No, he used hardcore, undeniable physics to totally dismantle the legal accusation that his microscopic online actions somehow broke society.
Which, if his defense holds up, it completely destroys how courts currently judge our digital footprints.
Our mission for you, the listener, is to basically decode these complex scientific concepts. From the Sapien Theorem to Avalanche Dynamics, we want to show you how they can be weaponized to expose the fatal flaws in how we judge cause and effect in the digital age.
Because what makes his approach so bulletproof is that he didn't just argue he was a small player.
Right.
He proved mathematically that the prosecution's entire concept of cause and effect was just fundamentally flawed. They were accusing him of a physical impossibility.
Okay, so let's look at the scene of the crime first. Before we can judge the impact of a single drop of water, we really need to understand the ocean it falls into.
That's a great way to put it.
The prosecution's main claim is that Dr. Chen's forward caused disorder. But on a massive global internet platform, what does order even look like?
Well, to answer that, Dr. Chen's defense introduces a really foundational concept in distributed computing. It's called the CAP theorem.
Okay, CAP theorem.
Yeah, developed by a computer scientist named Eric Brewer. CAP stands for consistency, availability, and partition tolerance.
Got it.
And the theorem basically proves mathematically that in any massive distributed system like a global social network, you just cannot simultaneously have all three.
So you have to pick your battles. Let's bring that down to earth for a second. What do those three things actually mean when you're just, scrolling through an app on your phone?
Sure, so consistency means every single user around the globe sees the exact same data at the exact same millisecond.
Okay.
Availability means the system always responds to your request. Your feed loads, your message sends, even if the data isn't perfectly up to date.
Right, nobody wants a loading screen forever.
Exactly. And partition tolerance means the system keeps running, even if some physical servers lose their connection to each other.
Which, I mean, that happens constantly, right? These networks run on thousands of physical servers spread across entire continents.
All the time. Cables get damaged, routers reboot, data packets just get dropped.
So partition tolerance isn't really an option, it's just a physical reality you have to design around.
Exactly. And because of that physical reality, system architects are forced to choose between consistency and availability.
And let me guess, social networks choose availability.
Invariably, yeah.
Yeah.
Their entire business model relies on you scrolling and interacting without any interruption.
Right. Keep the eyeballs on the screen.
Yep. The trade-off is that they completely abandon strict consistency. So you and your friend might look at the same post, and you see 50 likes while they see 48.
Oh, I've seen that happen.
We all have. That mismatch, that slight delay, that localized chaos, it's just baked into the code.
Wait, so the platform is mathematically designed to be out of sync?
It is.
So accusing the network of being disordered is fundamentally like complaining that water is wet. They are literally trying to criminalize the wetness.
That is the absolute perfect way to look at it.
It's like standing in the middle of a massive, bustling city and calling the natural, everyday noise of traffic a public disturbance.
Right. But it's not a disturbance. It's the definition of the city functioning. You can't prosecute someone for contributing to the baseline noise of reality.
That makes so much sense. But okay, what about his specific account?
Well, Dr. Chen builds on this systemic reality by introducing another crucial concept. It's called Barabasi-Albert scale-free networks.
Scale-free networks.
Yeah. And this describes the actual architecture of who is connected to whom. We tend to think of social media as this flat grid where everyone is connected roughly equally.
Like a big mesh.
Right, but that's just not how it works at all.
It's highly unequal. You have giant mega accounts, and then you have, well, everyone else.
Exactly. Scale-free networks are defined by that extreme inequality. You have hub nodes, which are massive media outlets, celebrities or major authorities with millions of followers.
The heavy hitters.
Right. And then you have the vast majority of users, the peripheral nodes. And Dr. Chen proved his account was a peripheral node of the most extreme kind.
How extreme.
He had under 100 followers, mostly inactive zombie accounts, and effectively 0 historical interactions.
0. Wow. And here's where it gets really interesting, because he wasn't just claiming he was unimportant to, like, garner sympathy from the judge.
No sympathy needed when you have the math.
Right. He proved, using something called Cohen's threshold formula, that he was mathematically a dead-end street in the network's topology.
Yeah, Cohen's formula deals with network robustness. It calculates how much damage a network can take before its macrostructure breaks down.
Okay.
The math shows that in a scale-free network, you can randomly remove almost all of the peripheral nodes, and the overall structure doesn't change at all. The information still flows perfectly through the hubs.
Let's make sure we have a clear picture of this. If you blow up the central interstate highway in a city, traffic stops. The city is paralyzed.
Total gridlock, yeah.
But Dr. Chen's account wasn't the interstate. It was like a dirt road leading to an abandoned shack. Activating or deactivating his account, according to Cohen's formula, physically cannot alter the macrostructure of the network.
The network is mathematically immune to his actions.
Okay, I buy that. The network as a whole didn't care about his account, but the prosecution isn't prosecuting the whole network structure, are they?
No, they are prosecuting his specific post.
Right. And even if he's a dead-end street, doesn't his post still have the potential to act like a virus? I mean, he forwarded it. It exists. What happens when we zoom in on the actual mechanics of that single share?
Well, to map that out, the defense turns to the Galton-Watson branching process.
Sounds intense.
It is. This is the gold standard mathematical model used by epidemiologists and data scientists to calculate how cascades grow. Whether we are tracking a biological virus spreading through a population or a piece of information spreading online.
And the driving engine of this model is a parameter we've all heard a lot about over the last few years, right? R0, the mean offspring number.
Exactly. R0 answers a very specific mechanical question. For every one person who sees this information, how many new people will they successfully pass it on to?
So, if the R0 is 2, one person tells 2, who tell 4, who tell 8.
Yes. The cascade grows exponentially. If it's exactly 1, it just replaces itself and lingers.
Wow.
But if the R0 is less than 1, the cascade is in a subcritical state.
Yeah.
It will inevitably hit a dead end.
And the sources outline how they calculated the R0 for Dr. Chen's specific account. They didn't just guess, which is crazy to me.
He really did the homework.
They looked at his low follower count, they factored in the percentage of those followers that were actually active, and then multiplied it by his historical engagement rate, which, as we said, was 0.
Yep.
And his R0 was estimated to be around 0.05.
Which firmly places his action in what we call a deep subcritical state. In the Galton-Watson model, when an R0 is that incredibly low, you trigger the extinction theorem.
The extinction theorem, that sounds pretty final.
It is. The probability of the information cascade dying out is, for all practical purposes, 1. It is a mathematical certainty that the spread will fail.
And the documentation actually calculates the expected total cascade size. If you plug his 0.05 R0 into the branching formula, the total number of shares his action will generate across the entire lifetime of the universe is roughly 1.05.
It's basically nothing.
Right. That means his original post plus a tiny, tiny statistical probability that even one other person ever hits the forward button.
The chain reaction is starved of oxygen the very moment it begins. It just cannot self-sustain.
The disconnect here is just staggering to me. Think about the legal standard the prosecution is trying to meet. To prove serious public disorder, you need evidence of an event triggering a massive disruption, right? Hundreds or thousands of shares, chaotic real-world actions.
Absolutely.
But the physics model proves the expected spread of this specific node's action is 1.05. How can a court claim a massive chain reaction occurred when the math literally proves the chain was broken on the very first link?
Well, the defense exposes a massive flaw in the prosecution's methodology right there. The prosecution did not provide actual, measurable transmission data showing a massive cascade stemming directly from Dr. Chen's account.
So what did they do?
They substituted hard data with a fear-based assumption.
Wow.
They looked at the content of the post, decided they didn't like it, and just assumed that this microscopic action must have caused macro effects simply because the content was controversial.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here, though. A savvy prosecutor is going to look at this math and pivot.
Oh, for sure.
They might say, sure, his account is small. Sure, his individual R0 is tiny. But society was a powder keg. The system was so tense that his single post acted as the spark. He dropped the final straw that broke the camel's back.
And you know what? The defense anticipated that exact argument.
Really?
Yeah, they addressed it using the science of avalanche dynamics, specifically a framework called self-organized criticality, or SOC, which was developed by physicist Purbeck.
This involves the famous sandpile model from the source text, right? Explain how that works for us.
Okay, imagine you are slowly, steadily dropping single grains of sand onto a flat table. At first, they just sit there.
Makes sense.
But over time, they form a pile. As you keep adding sand, the size of the pile gets steeper and steeper until they reach a specific angle. This is called the critical state.
Okay, I'm with you.
At this exact point, dropping just one single microscopic grain of sand can cause a massive section of the pile to collapse in an avalanche.
Boom. That's the prosecution's entire argument right there. They would say, look at the physics. One grain of sand can cause an avalanche. He dropped a grain of sand. He's guilty.
Ah, but that completely misreads the mechanics of the physics. For an avalanche to happen, the system must already be pushed to that extreme critical threshold.
Right.
In epidemiological terms, the systemic R0 of the entire society must already be hovering dangerously close to 1.
Because if you drop Dr. Chen's grain of sand on a flat table, absolutely nothing happens. It just sits there.
Precisely. If a massive social avalanche truly happened, the root mechanical cause isn't the single grain of sand dropped by a peripheral node.
So what is it?
The root cause is the fact that the system was built, maintained, and driven into a highly unstable, hypercritical state over a long period of time.
The source material uses a really brilliant analogy for this. Imagine a bridge designed to hold 100 tons safely.
Right.
Over the years, the architects neglect maintenance and slowly load it up with 99.99 tons of permanent weight.
Just hovering right at the edge.
Exactly. Then a tiny little sparrow lands on the railing and the entire bridge collapses into the river. Did the sparrow destroy the bridge? No.
Of course not.
The system was already sitting at the absolute edge of disaster. The sparrow is just a participant in a doomed system.
And this is where Dr. Chen executes just a brilliant logical reversal. If we are applying the physics of self-organized criticality, we have to ask a hard question.
Which is?
Who actually shapes the steepness of the sand pile? Who loads the permanent weight onto the bridge? It's not the peripheral nodes.
No, it's the hub nodes.
Yes, the true hub nodes, which in this context are the governing authorities themselves, are the ones injecting systemic risk into the structure.
Oh, wow.
By pursuing aggressive false accusations, by creating an environment of fear, instability, or hypersurveillance, they erode the structural trust of the network. They push the angle of the sand pile steeper and steeper.
So they are acting as the true mechanical source of the systemic avalanche.
Exactly. All while trying to legally blame the sparrow that just happened to land on the railing.
It's a breathtaking argument. He's basically standing in front of the authorities saying, I didn't break the system. Your systemic mismanagement made the system so fragile that you're now terrified of a sparrow.
It takes some real nerve.
It really does. And to make sure the judges fully grasped the absurdity of the prosecution's logic, Dr. Chen translated this entire dynamic into the most bulletproof laws of classical and modern physics.
He frames the prosecution's entire case as a fundamental misunderstanding of fluctuations versus phase transitions.
Walk us through those terms. What is the actual difference between a fluctuation and a phase transition?
Sure. So in statistical physics, a fluctuation is normal, harmless background noise. It's the random, microscopic jitter of individual molecules in a glass of water.
Okay, totally harmless.
Right. A phase transition, on the other hand, is a macro-level structural change, like the entire glass of water suddenly boiling into steam or freezing into solid ice.
So Dr. Chen is pointing out that the legal prosecution committed a massive category mistake. They are trying to prosecute a microscopic fluctuation by claiming it caused a macro phase transition.
Exactly.
And the source text provides these stunning physical analogies to show why this is completely ridiculous.
Yeah, he relies on what we call structural isomorphisms to prove his point.
Hold on, isomorphism is a pretty heavy academic word. Are you just saying he used really clever poetic metaphors to make the judge think?
No, this is a vital distinction, actually. A metaphor is just poetry, like comparing a heart to a red rose.
Right.
An isomorphism means the underlying mathematics are identically structured. The math governing how a physical electron behaves is the exact same math governing how his single social media post propagates through a network.
Okay, let's unpack these isomorphisms because they really highlight the absurdity of the charges. Let's start with thermodynamics.
Okay, so accusing Dr. Chen's tiny account of causing serious public disorder is structurally identical to saying one single molecule's random natural movement caused the entropy of an entire room to spike, instantly boiling the ocean.
Which is insane.
Right. The mechanism is impossible. It directly violates the second law of thermodynamics. A single molecule simply does not possess the kinetic energy to alter a macro state.
Then he applies electromagnetism. The prosecution's logic is the structural equivalent of claiming a single stray electron jittered inside a copper wire, and that microscopic jitter alone caused the entire national power grid to collapse.
The scales just don't match. An electron doesn't have the voltage to blow a regional transformer.
It's so clear when you put it like that. And then the same applies to astrophysics and general relativity.
Yeah, the prosecution is arguing the equivalent of a single grain of sand floating in deep space, somehow altering the gravitational space-time structure of the entire Milky Way galaxy.
And why is that physically impossible?
Because gravity requires mass. Space-time only bends when there's a massive density of matter, like a star or a black hole.
Right.
A peripheral node with 50 followers has the network mass of a grain of sand. The math literally proves it lacks the density to bend the social fabric around it.
My absolute favorite one, though, is how he uses nuclear physics. Accusing his isolated account of causing systemic chaos is mathematically identical to saying a single isolated uranium atom spontaneously split, and you are blaming that one atom for a massive nuclear explosion.
Which completely ignores the required mechanism for a nuclear explosion. A single atom splitting just releases a tiny puff of energy that immediately dissipates.
Doesn't do anything on its own.
Right. For a nuclear chain reaction to physically sustain itself, you need a highly compressed critical mass of radioactive material. Without that critical mass, the chain reaction dies instantly, just like Dr. Chen's post hitting the extinction theorem.
This approach is such a masterstroke because it completely shifts the burden of proof. By framing his defense around structural isomorphisms, Dr. Chen forces the prosecution into a corner.
They really can't escape it.
They can no longer just point fingers and say, well, you caused a disturbance. To prove him legally guilty, they literally have to argue against the established laws of thermodynamics, gravity, and quantum mechanics.
Good luck with that.
Exactly. They have to prove to the judge that an electron can take down a power grid.
Which, of course, no prosecutor can do. The fundamental physical laws of the universe are just not on their side. Science demands that a cause must mechanically match the scale of its effect, or there must be a proven, unbroken chain of amplification.
And the prosecution had neither of those things.
Exactly neither.
So let's bring this all together. We started by looking at the actual architecture of the digital ocean, the scale-free networks, and the CAP theorem.
Right, and that proved that lag and disorder are just baseline engineered features of distributed systems, not anomalies you can prosecute.
Then we looked at the specific mechanism of sharing through the Galton-Watson branching process. The calculation of an R0 of 0.05 proved that a node with near-zero influence exists in a deep subcritical state.
Yeah, the math guarantees the cascade starves of oxygen almost before it even begins.
We tackled the spark in a powder keg argument using the sand pile model and self-organized criticality. And that proved that even if an avalanche occurs, the physical fault lies with the architects who loaded the bridge with tension and pushed the system to a hypercritical state, not the sparrow that landed on the railing.
And we wrapped up with the undeniable laws of statistical physics, demonstrating that confusing a microscopic baseline fluctuation with a macro system phase transition is a fundamental scientific error.
It violates thermodynamics, electromagnetism, relativity, and nuclear physics.
All of it proves, unequivocally, that a microscopic action from an isolated peripheral node mathematically cannot cause a macro system disruption.
Which brings us to the real reason this matters for you as you go about your day. Why should you care about a hyper-technical legal defense using physics?
That's a fair question.
Because we live in a world that is incredibly desperate to draw straight linear lines of blame in a wildly complex, nonlinear digital universe. Every single day, we see outrage cycles trying to pinpoint the exact single tweet or single video or single isolated person who's supposedly ruined everything.
We constantly fall into the trap of magical thinking. We give microscopic events these supernatural, society-altering powers simply because we are anxious about the general state of the world.
Exactly.
This defense is an absolute masterclass in critical thinking. It is a reminder to always demand the math.
Demand the scale. Demand the actual measurable evidence of the transmission chain when someone claims a single isolated action broke the world. It's about learning to see the massive invisible system instead of just hyper-fixating on the tiniest symptom.
True.
Which leaves me with one final thought for you to mull over. Let's go back to that courtroom we imagined at the very beginning. You're sitting there, the mathematical X-ray of the network topology is up on the projector screen, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that the sparrow didn't break the bridge.
Right.
It forces you to turn around and look at the people pointing the finger. If a massive complex system like a society or a global social network is truly so fragile that a single microscopic whisper could bring the whole thing crashing down, then who is the real threat to public order? The person who whispered or the architects who built such a terrifyingly fragile machine in the first place?